So our top story for you this morning, and the Prime Minister has vowed to bring in new measures to tackle this ongoing cost of living crisis, but he has said that spending is not the only answer.
Yeah, he made that pledge, although it wasn't mentioned in yesterday's Queen's speech. Some papers this morning describing it as a bit of a U-turn or perhaps an urgent bit of policy on the hoof. Let's get some details now from Sam Ashworth-Hayes, who joins us in the studio from the Henry Jackson Society. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. Formerly of the Henry Jackson Society.
Oh, sorry, formerly of the Henry Jackson Society. Bring me up to date then. What's your latest Director of Studies as where
That's what I was, yes. I'm now an Associate Fellow, but yeah.
Associate Fellow, lovely. So, listen, yesterday's Queen's speech was highly trailed. We kind of knew what to expect from it, but what we didn't see, I suppose, is almost the big topic of the day, and that was very little on how the government is planning to help people with this cost of living crisis.
Yeah, and I mean, in some sense, it does make a degree of reason in that if you're going to do something about the cost of living crisis, which is being driven by supply shocks, the best time to have done something is 5 years ago. And it is a slightly unfortunate fact that this government, or the Conservative Party at least, has now been in power since 2010 and has not really focused on economic growth as an output. You have wages which were basically where they were in 2008. You have households spending 20% of their income on rent, 30% in London at the median. All of this sort of this business of rising energy prices, rising food prices would be a lot easier to bear if we were more prosperous. And it is unfortunate Boris and co are correct that they can't just sort of turn the tap, spend a lot of money and have the problem naturally resolve itself. But like I say, it's unfortunate we're in this situation in the first place.
But we are where we are.
We are where we are.
Which is the harsh reality of it all. What options are available then to the Prime Minister? Because there's so many people who've been calling for a reduction in some of the pressures which we all face, and some of that involves things like the green levy, 25% of our energy bills. Now, that could be very easily sorted out, couldn't it, even if it was only a short-term measure?
There are definitely short-term measures you could make to improve people's spending power, if that's how you want to address the issue, although I suspect to a degree they don't want to sort of pump more demand into the economy right now, if that's what they are concerned about on the inflation side of things. Something they could do, sort of looking in the longer term, is to almost look down the road and say, well, look, what happens when we next have a sort of a situation in which there is a potential recessionary pressure? How would we be better placed to face that? And fundamentally, there's a real lack of attention being paid to sort of long-term growth and prosperity in this government and, unfortunately, in previous administrations as well. The Oxford and Cambridge Arcs on life support, people can't get permission to build homes or labs or research facilities. And British businesses are woefully underproductive.
Yeah. Well, look, Sam, I mean, we're aware of the crises and the challenges, and I suppose lots of people thinking, OK, well, we'll just wait to see what the Chancellor says in the autumn. That hint, though, that the Prime Minister gave yesterday, that the Chancellor and he were going to speak more about measures to tackle the cost of living in the coming days, then sort of backtracked with statements from the Treasury saying there will be no emergency budget. Downing Street saying the same. Don't read too much into that comment. Do you think that an emergency budget would have been a good idea?
Given the track record of support they've sort of provided in the past, I don't think putting something out without fully thinking it through would have been exactly the best move. We have obviously seen they do have the capacity to spend a lot of money if they want to do so, as we saw in 2020 when they managed to get out of nowhere this furlough scheme. I suspect that what they possibly could have offered is something a little more in the way of a benefits uplift on lower incomes. I know they've sort of discussed previously having IT system limitations, which sort of prevent them from doing that. But fundamentally, I think that probably would have helped a lot of people who will be really feeling the pinch.
I mean, it's this difficult situation, isn't it, of how society is split. We have those who can cope, even though they're going to be worse off. You've got the working poor who are really going to struggle, and you've got those who just can't cope anyway at the moment. So is it a case of prioritising that sort of saying that the working poor and those above are just going to have to find a way to make this work, and it's going to be hard, but we've got to prioritise those who are really absolutely at rock bottom now?
I mean, that would be I suppose, one way of doing it. So at the moment, they're not really sort of prioritising anyone, as it were. Everyone's sort of being left to do what's best what they can. So that would be an improvement, certainly.
I was intrigued that you talked a lot earlier about business and about business is not performing properly and we need to continue to invest in business. How much of that has to be a priority? Because in the immediate term, people are saying, well, that's long-term planning, isn't it, ultimately, rather than an immediate solution?
It is long-term planning, but it's to a degree what you have here is if you have a sort of global supply shock where prices are going to go up and output's going to go down, and you are limited in what you can do about it. You can't sort of spend your way out of that. So unfortunately, the more money you throw at it to an extent, the more prices go up. What you can sort of do is say, well, this would be a lot easier to bear if we were wealthier. As you say, those who are already on higher incomes can take this a lot better than those on lower incomes. So I think looking at those longer-term issues, actually, and saying, goodness, wouldn't this have been a lot better if we were sort of as wealthy as somewhere like Ireland, for instance?
Sam Ashworth-Hayes, let's just discuss a few of the headline parts that were included in the Queen's speech yesterday. I suppose the sort of highlights that jump out, the Daily Mail this morning on their front page, the death knell for work from home, perhaps not expected to be announced yesterday, left out from the Queen's speech. Also other headlines saying the Tories are bereft of ideas. What do you think? Another one I spotted, neighbours are to get the right to vote on planning applications. What were the things that you sort of want to pick out from yesterday?
So the planning element in the Levelling Up bill is quite interesting because what I think they're hinting at is something fairly close to street votes, which is an idea that's been floating around, sort of pushed by John Myers, Ben Southwood and others, which is possibly quite a good idea, actually, in that it would be sort of by approving local codes, people would be able to build extensions, build extra stories onto their houses, and therefore add something to housing supply, which I think, as we all know, is in dire need of liberalisation. So that I'm sort of quite in favour of. They are still doing some things which I would rather they weren't. I'm not wholly enamoured of any of the new digital legislation they're sort of pushing for, and obviously we didn't expect it, but didn't expect it to be killed off, but obviously the online safety bill is still going through, which I think is a dreadful piece of legislation.
But it's interesting, on the planning application, there was some expectation, wasn't it, that they were almost going to pre-approve some sort of system so that people could just build. I mean, they backtracked from that a little bit. Was there a fear that could have, in effect, gone a bit haywire?
I think every time you look at something to do with the planning system, you basically have to take into account that they will face fierce sort of local competition from other political parties who will run on a platform of basically allowing fewer houses. So they're sort of eyeing some of the seats in South East and some of the other areas and sort of worried that basically the NIMBY vote will come out and cost them votes.
OK, look, do you know what? It's really fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Fascinating to get your perspective on all of that. Thank you. I tell you what I think is really interesting with all of that is the fact that there is a desperate need for something to be done, particularly with cost of living, immediately. Yeah. And no one is quite doing it. Now, I know it's a hard thing to do. I know the government, for example, does not want to do anything on green levy. And it certainly doesn't want to do anything on national insurance. And I understand that. Yeah.